I don't see why I have to not show off my cool prayer beads and various medals, holy medals and crosses, because I want to hide certain things. But I was given an interesting um, link to a website that tries to purport that America, the United States of America, has always been at war. And actually, again, this is the historian snob in me or geek in me. Uh, the war for the United States independence began in 1776. No, it didn't. It began in 1775. Okay? So let's go through this, and I have the website up. But I also wrote a lot of it down. Then I was like, you know what? Because I have it in two things. 1776, 1775 to 1783, the American Revolution, right? Um, and then I have on the side here, would be, which I consider skirmishes or not actual wars as we think of them, right? I mean, we didn't call the standoff at Waco a war, or they didn't call the what's it called? Standoff at Ruby Ridge a war, things like that, or all the hippies in the sequoia trees in National Park in California. That wasn't considered a war, even though the government got involved and there were also men with guns there. So the Chickamauga War, 1776 to 1795. Yeah, this is part, and also the Northwest Indian Wars, 1785 to 93. These are all this is part of the American Revolution, because one side would pay um, would ally and pay um, would ally with certain Native American tribes, right? For lack of a better word, it's called Native American tribes, like the Iroquois, um, the Cherokee, the Mohawk, the Huron, or whatever. And so their enemy, it's like your enemy is, since we're now allied and we're now friends, my enemy is your enemy and your enemy is my enemy. Well, when two people from these civilizations of clothed men that lived across this great ocean signed pieces of paper, didn't stop the Indians from continuing on, and said, well, they're still our enemy and they're still allied with enemy tribesmen, so it just carried on. Um, Not to mention that the Native Americans that actually worked with the revolutionaries got screwed over hardcore, hardcore. Shays' Rebellion, I know all about Shays' Rebellion. How can you call that a war? The Whiskey Rebellion, again, how can you call that war? Involvement in the French Revolution or revolutions. Again, you can't call that America fighting in a war. We didn't. What did we? Offering moral support is now equal to, storming the beaches of Normandy. Um, we get the first actual war, the first Barbary War, 1801 to 1805. Okay, or I should say the second actual war. And then we see Tecumseh here. Now, Tecumseh has a special place in my heart. Tecumseh and the Prophet. I remember being brought to, the field, Tippy Canoe and Tyler, to multiple times when I was young. Um, this sticks in the heart of many, many, many people in Illinois, even though the battlefield is not technically in Illinois. Um, People came from miles around because of Tecumseh and the Prophet to fight. Uh, The War of 1812, which lasted from 1812 to 1815, where the British, after losing a war, how many decades prior? Let me see. Oh, wow. 40 or 50 years prior, right? Decide to, yeah, let's take over New Orleans and burn down the White House and try to set fire to New York. We're just going to be complete assholes. We don't actually want to reconquer it. We just want to, you know, kill a bunch of innocent Americans and fuck up their way of life. Real classy Great Britain, or English, or Crown people, whatever you want to call yourselves. Creek War, again, this is spanning from 1813 to 1814. Who do you think inspired that uprising? The British. Second Barbary War, okay, 1815. Yes. And out of these, the First and Second Barbary Wars, this is where our Marines come from. That's why from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. The Seminole War, 1870 to 1880. Again, these are almost just like skirmishes. They're not actual wars, right? And then we have the Comanche War versus the Texans, the Spanish, Mexico, or I should say Tejanos, Spain, Mexico, Texas, the U.S. versus the Comanche, spanning from 1820 to 1875. The Comanche were a warrior-like people, not unlike the Apache, that would attack anybody who wasn't them. So again, how do you call this a war? It's not. It's just like getting rid of a biker gang or something, you know. And I don't mean to speak ill of Native Americans. Of course, I don't believe all Native Americans acted like how the Comanche did at that period of time. Obviously, I have great respect for the Cherokee, Chickasaw, the Creek, um, as well as the Potawatomi and certain groups of the Mohawk. The Mexican-American War. Yep, that's a, how did we skip the Texas Revolution? Oh, that's right, because the Texans were their own republic and it had nothing to do with the United States. Mexican-American War, or also known as Polk's War, 1846 to 1848. Very unpopular war. In fact, if I was alive at that time, I'd be fighting for Mexico because all of the Irish Catholics that were impressed into the United States Army found that the United States was extremely anti-Catholic at that time, and as soon as they got to Mexico, they were surrounded by extremely Catholic people. So they were free for once. So they deserted and formed their own brigade called San Patricios, which fought to the death at Chapultepec Castle and are remembered to this day by um, Mexico and the Mexican people as the bravest of the brave, and the ones who were willing to fight the most and die for Mexico. And there are still people descended from the San Patricios that exist today. There's Murphy. You'll actually find a lot of Murphys in Mexico, or not so many, but when you find them, 90% of the time they're actually the descendants of these San Patricios that switched over to the Mexican side. Um, Now, it said the Civil War because I went through and I saw, oh wow, they got the Akira War, the Aegean Sea Pirates, which were the Greeks, the Winnebago War, and that was 1827, and the Black Hawk War, 1832, both in Illinois. I both know a lot about those. Um, the Sumatran, the first Sumatran thing. That was us aiding the Dutch in the 1830s. Again, you can't really call that a war. Again, remember, Congress has to declare war. Um, the Civil War, which is not a civil war, it's the war between the states, or if you really want to get on it, the War of Northern Aggression, although I call it the war between the states, 1861 to 1865, where two groups of Americans that both believed in the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights slaughtered each other in the most gruesome way. Then we have the Spanish-American War, which immediately after it talks about the Philippine War. That was part of it. Okay, so back off. Spanish-American War, which we should have never fought. It was trumped up, but we got control of Cuba and the Philippines because of it. The Border War, 1910 to 1919, Mexican Revolution. Yeah, this is the time of Benito Juarez and Pancho Villa, um, who was a horse thief who crossed over the American border to rob, rape, steal, plunder, and get munitions. And this would begin the Constitution that the Cristeros would fight against. This is the Constitution that outlawed basically all Mexican culture and religion and practice and dancing. And it took them until 1945 for the country to say we are going to officially ignore all of these laws. Um, and there was a 3-year period where Calles, not necessarily Juarez, but Calles enforced the if we suspect you of being a Catholic or of praying to any god, it is the death penalty on the spot, and that's what gave rise to the Cristeros. I consider them soldados de Nuestra Dama, but that's another story. And then we have World War One, 1917 to 1918, World War II, 1941 to 1945, Korean War, 1950 to 1953, Vietnam, 1965 to 1973, and then we had to go back in 1975 and try to evacuate as many South Koreans as possible. Grenada, I remember that. I don't know why I remember that. I was 1 year old when that took place, but I remember it being talked about. Panama, I do remember Panama because of Noriega. He was on the phone with his girlfriend. He was hiding out in the Vatican. He was talking about climbing the ladder, and they were worried that that was a metaphor for him taking his own life. But he lived a life of luxury in Marionville, Illinois, because he had all the secrets on George Bush and not only the Republicans but also the Democrats. He had all the dirt on all of them. So he lived in something better than a 5-star hotel room that was inside one of the most heavily secure prisons in the world that held, like the worst of the worst, and yet his you can't even call it cell living quarters was like the size of the downstairs of a very big house, and he had all the luxuries he could ever want. Panama, we just went over that. I remember that. The first Gulf War, I definitely remember that. And also, let me mention this. That was United Nations effort too, because that was the liberation of Kuwait, right? Then we have the Balkans, which does that really count? Does Bill Clinton bombing hospitals belonging to Serbs? Because it had split between the Bosnian War and then the war for Kosovo. F you, only 2,000 people were killed, and from a certain ethnic group, while there was tens of thousands of Serbs that were killed. But no, it's these 2,000 people who we claim are Bosnians. Doesn't matter that a fifth of them were actually Croats and another fifth were actually Serbs, but we're just going to call all of them Bosnian, and then we're going to say, oh, this is an excuse to bomb. And the bombings happened when the Monica Lewinsky trial was on the air, so kind of forced it off the air, which is creepy. So yeah, we actually responded to a fake genocide and created our own genocide by targeting bridges and hospitals. We should be ashamed of ourselves. The war in Afghanistan, 2001 to, let's face it, 2017. The war in Iraq, or the second round, 2003 to, it said 2011. Sorry, folks, we're still there. So 2017. But let's go through stuff that was not on there, right? The Arab Spring that was caused by Barack Obama, the Libyan civil war, the destruction of the Tunisian government, the destruction of the Egyptian government, and the attempted toppling of Bashar al-Assad, which caused a lot of ethnic cleansing and genocide. So, yeah, little skirmishes with Native Americans. Does that really constitute as war? I mean, for God's sake, they didn't even have Vietnam on here, did they? Did I? Oh no, I mentioned Vietnam. I mentioned Vietnam. Um, and that's wasn't technically a war, but it's, let's just say it's a war, right? Because it's functionally that. But oh, the battle at Tippecanoe between Tecumseh and the Prophet against Tyler's men. I mean, is that that's a war? No, that's a skirmish. Or aiding um, the revolutionaries in the French Revolution, that counts as being part of a war. Shays Rebellion, the Whiskey Rebellion. This is really grasping at straws. And then saying the Comanche, even though the Tejanos fought them, chronological order, the Spanish, then the Mexicans, then the Tejanos, then the Texans, then the United States were fighting the Comanche. Weren't the most peaceful people. The Greek Aegean Sea Pirates, and also the Winnebago War and the Black Hawk War. Again, Illinois, I know about those two things. I mean, you know, in some cases on here, it's like 3 men got killed because, 50 people on this side and 30 people on that side fired guns at each other. We better call that a war. No, I'm sorry. No. But what wasn't on there was the shit that that Obama had just pulled, or the stuff that Bill Clinton had pulled by bombing aspirin factories in the Sudan and nurseries as well. Again, to get himself out of the news for the Whitewater scandal. So, hey, there's a trick of this. I mean, again, you guys know I used to be a lifelong Democrat, and a hardcore Chicago Democrat, right? But I'm sorry, when it's just when the solution to every Democrat president is let's slaughter a bunch of Arabs, that'll make our problems in the news go away. I'm sorry, for me that's not an option. Is that some form of racism? That I favor the life of Arabs and Latinos and Irish, possibly to a more personal degree than other races of people. I don't think it is, but also I think everybody else should be just as outrageous as me. So, yeah, America being in perpetual war. Oh yeah. Oh, by the way, the French, who supplied the Hutu with the machetes during their genocide, and actually gave them support technical and military support when the genocide was going on. Was it the French? I think it was the French who illegally and unilaterally bombed multiple countries in West Africa in the early 2000s. Was that France? Oh, I think it was France. So, yeah, that website I don't buy. Peace to you.